introduce Gary. Gary's been instrumental in recognizing the potential for BRM in South Africa. I've met Gary at the Foschini Group a few years back, passionate about the BRM, and has tirelessly driven the adoption and formation of the local chapter. We're very lucky that Gary has many years' experiences with best practices and with working with membership associations. So this is maybe the 1000th time that Gary started a association like the BRM South Africa chapter. But Gary has previously also, from a BRM perspective, been the recipient of both the BRM Institute Consultant of the Year and their prestigious Arnie Award for contribution globally to the BRM community. So welcome, Gary. Look forward to hearing the history of the BRM South African chapter.
Thanks, Baz. And look, in a moment, I'll go through how we got to where we are now, and just to mention, following on from Aaron, I mean, I was dead lucky to be introduced to Aaron. It's actually 4.5 years ago. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if that had never happened, because none of this could have occurred. It's quite possible. And at the time, we had an hour's discussion, and it was like a complete eye-opener for me, but combined with a perfect match. So on the one hand, I've always been focused on business value and the whole idea of relationships, but had no idea that the BRM Institute existed, and had no idea even what BRM was, if I'm honest, at least not the term BRM. It's what I had been doing for probably 20 years, but no one had ever called it BRM. And the other thing that struck me was, which is what this slide's about, is having moved to South Africa now, 16 years ago, the culture here is deeply rooted in relationships. I mean, the Ubuntu word, for those locals, who know that term, this is the origin of almost human nature, on the African continent. And it's just the same thing. On our own, we can do nothing. If we work together, we can do everything. And so I just felt that we've got an opportunity here, not just from a kind of IT or best practice point of view, but from a real cultural point of view. And that's what's made everyone, I think, so excited, to see this move forward. And the other thing is that, we did some research. We sort of dug around LinkedIn, and I think the truth has been, it still is a challenge, that the BRM term is not that well known. Relatively speaking, we don't have a vast number of so-called BRMs, but what we do have is a vast number of people doing what BRM is. And so, our biggest opportunity, but also our biggest challenge is making people aware of what we are actually doing, and building on what has been actually quite a strong history. Baz's organization was the second one that we got in touch with, and they and others have been doing this BRM type of work for at least 15 years. And at a time when the use of technology and the benefit of relationships has never been greater, not just in South Africa, but on the African continent, because everyone is desperately wanting to move forward. Obviously, we've had some setbacks with COVID, although in a funny kind of way, COVID has actually strengthened some of the arguments and some of the reasons and even some of the behaviors. We have, as was mentioned in the video, very young demographics, eager to learn, very little legacy. And so a really, ripe opportunity to actually take advantage of what we talk about. But what was sorely lacking was any kind of guidance and any kind of community. And I can remember, when at TFG and various other places that I went to, everyone said, good grief, we've been doing this on our own. We've invented something from scratch. We never knew there was anyone else we could speak to. So I think in terms of local relevance, there's a fantastic potential. And obviously we're trying hard now to get this to grow, which is why we've got this first event. Obviously this year's been tricky, but we're getting all set, for the future. So just some of those statistics are very interesting. And it's because it's not just IT business partner. Business partner tends to be the more common term or variation of that for the role as opposed to the function that we're supporting. And we're actually already beginning to make connections now with HR business partners. So there's, you know, a good number of people that we hope will come into our community. So just to finish, right, go to the next slide, just to briefly explain the journey. So as I said, you know, I think Ira mentioned, you know, the BRM Institute isn't that old. I mean, it's phenomenal what's actually happened in a short time, because it's just 7 years, and there's an immense amount of content, but also an immense amount of people who are supporting and driving this. I made contact in March of 2016, and from that moment, we obviously began to drive training. And we took a big risk, actually, which thank goodness worked out, of deciding on the first year, really, to join the network of what were called BRM Connect events. And thanks to Aaron, you know, Aaron and some of the team members flew out here and helped us run an event both in Cape Town and Johannesburg, which went really, really well. And that kind of boosted the morale, I think, in terms of what's possible and what can be done. And then I was the ambassador for a period of time, and using that role, which really helped, actually, because it gave me a label and a certain amount of credence, and using that label, I was able to grow a lot of awareness through various seminars. And we had 2 or 3 corporates actually happy to host us, which was really nice as well. But I guess we got to a certain point, or I felt we were getting to a certain point where we needed something really concrete. And you know, international institutes are all very well, but national recognition tends to be helped if there's something tangible, you know, on the ground locally. And so, and this is something I've experienced elsewhere with other organizations. So I put forward the proposition of driving a chapter, and Aaron supported us with that. And that's what we've done over the last 2 to 3 years. It takes time because we had to build a network of volunteers. We've got a great bunch of people. You know, it's a bit like the BRM way, you know, get others to do the work and everything will flourish. I mean, I don't mean that in a negative way, you know, so my whole mantra has been, you know, sit in the back seat wherever possible and try and get the other guys to see what's possible. And boy, it's grown really, really nicely. So in this event, I haven't done anything other than now pressing the button. So really pleased with that.
Shared ownership, Gary. Shared ownership. Shared ownership, right?
Shared ownership, yeah, exactly. And just, you know, the ethos, which is, you know, helping others to improve and helping others to do things. And so what I'm just trying to do is share my experience, but let other people drive the show. And of course, it's not just Baz who's gone on the board of directors, but Dilshad, who was in Baz's team, then decided to take a big opportunity and big decision, you know, to go to Dubai. I've been out to see her in Dubai, which has been really great, and Dilshad's on the board. So we've done really well locally, I think, in terms of making an impact. So that's all I really wanted to say. But obviously, going forward now, what we really want to do is get the word out, do more of these events, and next year really hit the ground with you know, a serious group of people. And look, because we're the first chapter, and actually the first chapter in the world, we basically said, look, it's based in South Africa, but everyone's welcome. We've obviously welcomed Africans. I was wondering, Aaron, whether we should dare ask, you know, the African Americans to join. It could be quite interesting. But you know, why not? We don't care who joins, and hopefully it will inspire some other people to build chapters elsewhere, which is already beginning to happen.
So Gary, we refer to it as a single global BRM community. We're one big family, right, with some regional get-togethers through the different chapters and communities. So we're all in one big single global BRM community.
Yeah. Okay, Baz. So let me hand back to you.
Thanks, Gary.